you can go to extremes in both of those, and that second one is where I'm at a majority of the time. And the way I prefer to do it is that as much as possible take decisions based on the gut, based on the information that you have available, and a very quick gut check with the rest of the team members that are there. And when you have to reevaluate the decision in the future, reevaluate it at that point in time. But don't spend 16 hours taking a decision which is a decision that's going to be a few $100 one way or the other, or maybe half a day worth of work one way or the other if it turns out to be the wrong decision. There's not much of a point in doing that. You have to let it play its course and you have to see where it goes at that point in time. So as a result of that, you can free yourself and do things at a much more rapid rate. And you don't spend countless hours in meetings and everything else. And in general, I don't like spending countless hours in meetings. I like to be very, very quick, very, very concise in each one of those points. And if you were to participate in a normal meeting in ScaleArc, even if it turns out to be a 4 or 5 hour meeting, the amount of content that's crammed into a 4 or 5 hour meeting is insane at times. Like there's a lot of people who've been overwhelmed at times with that amount of information if they're new, because they don't understand various contexts and topics. But everybody is able to ramp up to that speed very, very quickly once they understand how it gets to happen, that process gets to happen. And then we're able to work very collaboratively, very, very quickly. And then I essentially have to wait till the other person finishes their work and I can play video games. So
Varun, you gave a long answer, but you didn't answer my question. What are your hobbies? So I had to compensate. Now tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock, you have to tee off with me at the Oxford Golf. Is that a promise? And then I promise.
If my 3D printer prints you out a golf ball, then you can play. Okay. Sadly, my 3D printer is in the US. So yeah, that's what I do. So I'm a 3D printing enthusiast. I'm a remote control flight enthusiast. I like motor racing, and the area is a famous place for motor racing because you have Sonoma Raceway up there, and you have Laguna Seca, which is one of the world's best tracks to the south, and it's amazing.
But this is the reality, not on the computer.
No, really. I've driven Formula 3 cars, I've driven Ferraris and on tracks and everything else, and what we were talking about on our way is my last car was the Ford Endeavour, and it's the most underrated car sold in India because it's actually based on an old American SUV, and it is rugged as hell. And I don't know how many of you have been to this place in Lonavala, which does a lot of the camping activities and exactly. So before that road to that place was built, I went to that place on the mud road in that car, and the most fun in the world that I've ever had. So it's awesome.
So let's now turn the floor to the audience.
Thank you, Varun. This is Arjun. Since you worked on sites like Money Control, my question was, if a startup was to build a web portal which is information rich, it's interactive, and it has to be scalable. Since it's a startup, does it make sense to outsource it to a third party because you're trying to test the prototype, or should you build it in-house? Because your product is your portal, right?
Depends on what your expertise are. If your expertise is the content and you want to outsource the technology and it's going to be a content play, yeah, you could. If it's going to be a technology play, no, you can't. Whatever is your core has to be your own. Right. You've got to keep it to yourself. So.
Hi Varun, this is Anil Raul. Good to hear yet another story, college dropout, doing some great stuff. What are the best learnings when you got out of the college? And the second consecutive question is
You could call me a college dropout if I actually went to college for some time. I don't even consider myself having gone to college in the first place. So.
There is a huge history of entrepreneurship that goes right.
Yeah.
Like it's in that phase.
Bill Gates went for a couple of years. There's a lot of other people who went for like a few years before they got out. I wouldn't even call myself a college dropout.
Okay. And the second consecutive question is, I hope you are a parent now. Are you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So how you are handling that situation, or how would you like your children if they face a similar situation?
So I had 2 children at the same time. I started ScaleArc and My daughter was born just about 3 months before I started ScaleArc. That's basically what I've dealt with from that point in time. And both take a lot of time. You've got to figure out a way to balance that pretty effectively, and I think the only way to do it, for me personally, and everybody's ways might be different, is weekends and dedicated vacation time. And that's the only way you could ever balance that out. Weekdays are impossible, and especially impossible considering that we're a cross-border organization, and my calls with the India team most of the time happen at 9 o'clock in the night US time. And
yeah, your time spending with the family. But my question was actually, if they decide one day, Dad, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to. I'm not interested in going to school.
Yes, 100%. In fact, here's the thing. Okay, this is a very famous example from the Bay Area. Like the most incredible school district in the Bay Area, and you could take that word incredible in many different ways. It's Cupertino. And it's insanely competitive. It's now mostly Indian and Chinese. And that's a school district that has almost all the schools that are there are rated 10 out of 10 in the official scorecard, the way that the California government does it. And we consciously chose not to go to Cupertino because we don't want my daughter to grow up to be completely biased that way. We want her to be a little bit more open in the way she learns and everything else, and be a little bit more diverse in her learnings rather than be completely educationally focused. And it does some of the strangest things. And I'll give you this one example which I'm particularly amazed by in case of my daughter. We taught her at one point in time, and this is another thing, right? Like, racially diverse countries such as India and US, and you have different people that you see. So she one day saw an African American gentleman, and he's dark, and she looks at most of the other people, and they're fair, and she's like, "Why is that so?" And she's, by the way, 5.5, and she asked this at me maybe 4. And what we told her was that this is because of melanin, the compound in the skin that causes you to be darker or lighter. We were recently at another place, and there's a gentleman sitting in front of us, and he had vitiligo. You know that, right? Where the skin color is not consistent. Some parts are fairer and some parts are darker. And she looks at that and she says, "Why is his melanin that way?" She didn't say, "Why does his skin look like that? Why is his melanin that way?" And kids actually have the ability to learn at a very, very rapid pace.
Curiosity.
And if you can encourage it, it'll happen. If you let others do it for you and they are not passionate about it, it won't happen. And there's only so passionate that somebody else can get about your kid.
Yeah, sorry. There is a huge, very popular TED talk by Ken Robinson, the educationalist now, US settled down. And he has a very famous for everyone education TED talk something. The topic name is "Schooling is Killing the Curiosity" kind of thing. It's very funny thing. Thank you, Varun. Thanks.
Hey, hi. This is Panduran Patil. I had a question related to you mentioned you incorporated your company in the US first, and then opened it off in the India. So, but when you were explaining the details, you mentioned that you started selling the products here in India first, and then went to the US.
Yep.
So I really didn't understood how.
So you set up a corporation in the US.
Okay.
You get your funding in the US. You file your IP in the US. And the US corporation funds the India company,
Okay.
and as a result of that, it's one cohesive entity. And the benefits of that is that at the end of the day, if you're building a global product, your IP can then belong to the US corporation and be filed by the US corporation in the US.
Okay.
So you don't have to go through the hassle of doing double patenting, where you, as an Indian company, would have to patent it in India and then refile it in the US, where you end up taking more time and double the cost and everything else. If you're building in global technology, the US patent market and the US patent office is basically where you